In a memo obtained by 60 Minutes, the airport's director of security wrote to the coalition authority, Custer Battles has shown themselves to be unresponsive, uncooperative, incompetent, deceitful, manipulative, and war profiteers. Other than that, they're swell fellows.
I would agree with most of that.
Even the war profiteers?
I think that what they were doing was of the nature of what I understand war profiteering to be about, which is to get into a chaotic situation and milk every penny out of it you can as fast as you can before the opportunity goes away.
The coalition authority not only refused to throw Custer Battles off the airport job, it wrote them a glowing review and continued to give them contracts, including one to supply logistical support for a massive program to replace the Iraqi currency.
And how did Custer Battles perform that contract?
Absolutely abysmally. I mean, it was beyond a joke.
Philip Wilkinson was a colonel in the British Army assigned to the coalition authority's Ministry of Finance and charged with providing security to convoys that traveled all over Iraq loaded with $3 billion in cash. The trucks were supplied by Custer Battles.
And you can imagine open trucks with that sort of money on the back was just a red-hot target for not only terrorists but criminals, and therefore we needed trucks that were going to work. When those trucks were delivered to us, some of them were physically dragged into our compound.
They were towed into the camp?
Towed into the camp.
And Custer Battles' response?
When questioned as to the serviceability of the trucks was, we were only told we had to deliver the trucks. The contract doesn't say they had to work. Which, I mean, when you're given that sort of answer, what can you do?
How did they get away with it?
I really don't know. I mean, it was just a joke. The assumption that we had was that they had to have high political top cover to be able to get away with it, because it was just outrageous, their failure to deliver that which they were contracted to do.
In fact, the company continued to work in Iraq for another year, even after Robert Isaacson, one of Custer Battles' major subcontractors, went to federal authorities with allegations of criminal misconduct. Isaacson and another whistleblower claim Custer Battles bilked the government out of $50 million, and they're suing the company on behalf of U.S. taxpayers to recover some of the money.
Well, they approached me 3 times to participate in the defrauding of the United States government. They wanted to open fraudulent companies overseas and inflate their invoices to the United States government.
Did the fraud actually take place?
2 weeks later, apparently, from what I'm understanding, 2 weeks later they began exactly the fraud they described to me.
According to a subsequent investigation by the U.S. Air Force, Custer Battles set up sham companies in the Cayman Islands to fabricate phony invoices that it submitted to the coalition authority with the intention of fraudulently inflating its profits.
According to this Custer Battles spreadsheet, which was left behind after a meeting with U.S. officials, the company submitted invoices on the currency contract totaling nearly $10 million, when its actual costs were less than $4 million. Electricity costs of $74,000 were invoiced to the coalition authority at $400,000. Those trucks that didn't work were bought on the local market for $228,000 and billed at $800,000.
Upwards of $70 million.
Mike Battles and Scott Custer, who are currently under investigation by the Justice Department, declined to be interviewed for this story because of the whistleblower lawsuit. But in a videotaped deposition for that case, Scott Custer disavowed any knowledge of the phony invoices.
Would you agree with me that it is highly improper for a contractor to simply fabricate invoices and then hand them in for payment?
Yes. I mean, the short answer, I don't believe, I'm not a government contracts expert or a legal expert, but I would think it's improper to fabricate anything that you know to not be true.
Custer and Mike Battles blamed their problems on former employees, competitors, and the bureaucratic incompetence of the CPA.
I know we were supposed to do one thing for a certain amount of money, and by the time it was said and done, they asked us to do many, many more things for a greater amount of money.
To date, the only action that's been taken against them has been a 1-year suspension from receiving government contracts. It has since expired.
I think what's happening over there is an orgy of greed here with contractors.
Today, the Policy Committee is holding a 5th hearing.
North Dakota Senator Byron Dorgan, chairman of the Democratic Party Policy Committee, says Custer Battles is small potatoes compared to behemoths like Halliburton and its subsidiary, Kellogg Brown & Root, who have collected half of all the money awarded to contractors in Iraq and according to Defense Department auditors, have overbilled taxpayers by more than $1 billion. Dorgan's committee has held hearings and heard testimony that Halliburton has overcharged for meals and fuel and gouged taxpayers on items as trivial as these hand towels.
Instead of buying a white towel, which would be $1.60, his company said, no, put embroidery our logo on it, $5. So what's the difference? Well, the American taxpayer is going to pay the bill.
Halliburton says the towels were embroidered to keep them from being stolen or lost, and that allegations it overbilled by $1 billion are exaggerated. But Dorgan says none of this is being seriously investigated. He says he's called for full congressional inquiries into alleged abuses by Halliburton and other contractors, but they have been defeated by the Republican majority in straight party line votes.
Let me tell you that there's very little oversight by anybody on anything in this Congress. We have a president and a Congress of the same party. They have no interest in doing any aggressive oversight.
The only one really looking into it is Stuart Bowen, the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, a position created by Congress back in 2004 to monitor construction and development projects to rebuild Iraq.
How would you describe the oversight early on with the CPA?
It was relatively non-existent.
In 2 lengthy reports, Bowen's staff outlined suspected fraud and incompetence of staggering proportions, like the $8.8 billion that the coalition seems to have lost track of.
$8.8 billion.
That's right.
And that's money that is not accounted for.
Not accounted for.
What you seem to be saying is that nobody really knows exactly where that $8.8 billion went to.
That's right.
Some of the money, Bowen says, was spent on projects it was intended for. It's just that there are no receipts. But some of it, like the funds to buy books and train personnel at this library in Karbala, simply vanished. 4 people have already been arrested on bribery and theft charges, and more arrests will follow.
How many investigations do you have going on right now?
Nearly 50.
And these are all involving suspected fraud or suspected
fraud, kickbacks, bribery, waste.
Involving American companies.
That's right.
Ambassador Paul Bremer, the former head of the Coalition Provisional Authority, has said most contractors were doing their best to perform quickly, and that it's unfair to apply standard accounting practices in the midst of war. To date, the U.S. government has taken no action to recover any of the missing money.